Yeah. Okay, good evening everyone. We are we're going to commence. Okay. We're going to gather. Yes. Vayakhel. Right. Now, have you all got a copy of the sheet? Those who wish to follow inside, as always, you don't have to, but if you'd like to. The Parsha Vayakhel is often misunderstood, and seems a bit repetitive, because it is the description of the beginning of the construction when Moshe conveys the command to the Bnei Yisrael, to the children of Israel, in terms of what they're supposed to do in terms of building the Mishkan. But when we get to understand a little bit of what is going on here, and we're primarily going to approach this parsha through the lens of last week's parsha. We're going to follow the approach in the commentators. The Vayakhel is the succession, immediately follows the golden calf, the Egel HaZahav, right? That pivotal moment of last week's parsha, Parshas Ki Sisa, which we discussed in detail, what happens to the people at that moment. And therefore the question that really this parsha asks of us is to understand what the recovery is. What the recovery is, what do the people do, how is Moshe able to bring them together in such a way that they're able to move forward, that they're able to begin again, or some form of continuity despite this incredible moral collapse and calamity that has befallen them. And the word Vayakhel is a fascinating word. Look what Rashi tells us. Rashi says, it says Vayakhel Moshe, let's read the pasuk first. The verse says, Vayakhel Moshe kol hadas bnei Yisrael. The Moshe gathered together the congregation of the children of Israel, Vayoma aleihem. You got that? Chapter 35, verse 1. And he says to them, Eila hadvarim, these are the words, these are the things, Asher tziva Hashem la'asos som, that Hashem has commanded to do. Right? These are the things that Hashem has commanded to do. So that word Vayakhel, there's a Rashi which is deceptively simple, but it's not, if you understand what Rashi is trying to do in depth. And Rashi, the greatness of Rashi's commentary is, there is so much depth in each word. Rashi never says anything superfluous, and there are so many commentaries explaining the depth of what Rashi means, and we're going to look at one of them tonight. Rashi says, Vayakhel Moshe, source 1, L'mocharas Yom HaKippurim. The day after Yom Kippur, Kishiyorat min ha'ar. When did this gathering take place? The day after Yom Kippur, when he descended from the mountain. Okay, so that's the first point Rashi makes. We'll come back to that. The significance of the fact that Moshe has come down after the day of Yom Kippur. What is that moment in time? That is the moment when the Jewish people are finally forgiven. That is the moment when he descends with the second set of tablets, right? The second set of tablets, so that there is this final moment of forgiveness. That is why Yom Kippur becomes Yom Kippur. That is the original Yom Kippur. That is the Day of Atonement. That is the Day of Forgiveness. V'hu lashon hifil. And then he says that this word Vayakhel is a hifil. The grammatical stem is a hifil. The word Vayakhel, we'll see. She'eino osef anoshim b'yodayim. He doesn't gather people together by action, by force, if you like, with his hands, not literally his hands, actually push people together. Elohei ne'esofin al pi diburo, but they are gathered through his word. V'targumo v'achnesh, and therefore the Targum, the Aramaic translation, is v'achnesh. Now, the Targum is, of course, a very accurate and careful translation, Aramaic translation of the Sukkim, of the verses in Chumash. And what Rashi is really trying to tell us here is you have to try and understand what that word really means, Vayakhel. It is a very soft form of gathering. It is not a gathering by force. There is a difference in grammar. It's always dangerous to talk about diktuk and grammar because you always get an expert in grammar who tells you didn't quite say it the right way. Grammar is a specialist subject. Causative. You see, it starts already, right? There you go. David's got it. Right. So the hifil is a causative. What is the other way of saying something? What's called the kal. The kal is the simple, right? Okay, but the simple, you've got the contrast, the kal and the hifil, right? The kal is a simple action. The Targum, the Aramaic translation of the kal form, would be uchanesh, right? Which means simply to gather. He gathered. Doesn't say that. Hifil really means he caused to be gathered. That the gathering happened through something else. It wasn't that he gathered them, but it caused to be gathered. We'll see why this is significant in a moment. It's very significant. Let's understand that the Gur Aryeh is the commentary of the Maharal of Prague, the great leader of Prague Jewry, a hugely important figure in Jewish history. And he has a commentary on Rashi called the Gur Aryeh. This is source number 2. And he says, Lo bar lomar shu lashon hifil. Rashi's not just coming to tell us that this is a hifil, the causative form. Devadei hu lashon hifil. Right? Vayakhel megizas lashon hifil. We know that's what it is, right? We understand that is the word. Vayakhel is a word which is causative. He says, there are some different forms of the text in the Targum of Onkelos. Uchnesh, Shulosh, and Kal. Some forms of the Targum had the word Uchenesh, which is the simple form, that he gathered, not that he caused to be gathered. It's confusing because in English we translate both the same way. So when you look at a Chumash in English, you look at the English, you'll be confused with what I'm saying, because it says, Vayakhel Moshe gathered. But that's the problem with the translation. We can't live without translations, because then we'd be stuck. We wouldn't be able to start and learning and understanding. We always have to remember that a translation has deficiencies. And this is a beautiful example of why it's deficient. Because in English, you're going to translate both the same way. You're not going to start by saying, he caused to be gathered, because then you lost your audience already. You're going to say, he gathered. But it doesn't mean that. That's not the right translation. So he says, because there were various different texts in the Targum, Shirosh and Kal, he says it's not correct. He's not gathering people together with his hands. And that's why he had to say that it's a causative form. They are gathered not by his hands, but through something else. Doesn't necessarily mean another person, but through something else. So what is it? What causes them to be gathered? V'hu hadibur. And Rashi tells us it is the word. It is what Moshe says. Shene'esofin al yedei dibur. They are gathered through his word. She'ilu haya ma'aseh osam biyadayim. Had he gathered them by force or with his hands, lo yatzorech lemo b'zeh lashon hifel. It wouldn't need to say the causative form. She'epol al yedei atzmo, because he's doing it himself. Because they gathered through his word, which is essentially something considered to be external to him, that's acting like it's as if it's someone else or something else acting. And that's why it is the phrase used is the hifil form, the causative. And that's why the correct Aramaic translation should be va'achnesh, which means to cause to be gathered. So why am I sharing this with you? Firstly, it's nice to have a little bit of understanding about Hebrew grammar and how it works, and that's important as well. There's a lot of Rashi in the Torah where he devotes considerable space to understanding the language. So that's the first point. But there's a much deeper point. You have a question, dude?
Yeah, I just don't understand. I mean, we would say in English, he called a meeting.
Yeah.
It would always be LP Dibble. We would always send out a message.
Right. You know,
So what does Rashi mean when he says normally he would have called them B'yodayim?
Yeah.
How do we understand that?
Yeah. Well, I think you could take your question a little bit further and say, okay, so what? It's obvious that that's how you gather people. You don't corral people with your, and Rashi, you don't with your hands and say, come here, you move over here, you move over here. That's not how you generally gather people. And that is why I think there is something more significant to this Rashi. And I think what Rashi is trying to tell us here, the deeper message is, that it is not by force that Moshe gathers them, but it is by something he does. It is by example. It is by what we would call his speech, his conduct. It is his dibur. It is something that he acts with, something he does, something he speaks, an example he sets that causes people to gather of their own accord. And this is why I think it is so perfectly and beautifully linked to the episode of last week's parsha, because the experience that the Bnei Yisrael have gone through, and we explained this last time, where it says Vayakhel mevakesh Hashem yitzei al ohel moed, that one of the lessons they have learned from the sin of the golden calf is to be active, not passive. Moshe takes the ohel moed, the tent of meeting. We explained that it means bet ulpana, right? The Targum translates it as a house of learning. You want to learn, you got to seek it. You got to find it. No one's going to do it for you. Mevakesh Hashem. You have to seek Hashem. It's not going to come and land on your plate. And this, I think, is the same idea. there needs to be a sense within the people that they wish to be gathered. And the only way you can do that is through inspiration. You cannot do it by force, because it will not work. Yes, you can't do it by intimidation, and more than that, John Locke says, you cannot force assent. In general, you can't force assent. People have to be able to be inspired to move. Sorry, Jeffrey, sorry.
No, I just want to say, as you said at the beginning, although you've already done the link between Ki Sisar, could you not argue the last few verses of Ki Sisar when they saw the Quran?
Yes, we're going to get to them.
When this man Moses speaks,
right,
there's something special there.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to make the link now to the Quran. Absolutely, right. The horns, not the horns, right? Yes, the famous mistake made by Michelangelo, right? Moses with the horns, right? You know, right? Keep Quran or Panav. Turn backwards.
Beams.
Yeah, beams. Yeah, of course. I know it's not. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're doing. But let's turn back. Thank you. And we're going to look at those psukim very briefly. It says, look at chapter 34, verse 34 and 35, and you'll see how the commentators make this link. It says, of Ovo Moshe lefnei Hashem, when Moshe came in front of Hashem, l'daber ito, to speak with him. Yeah, very end of Ki Tisa. Can you see that? You got it? The last two psukim of Ki Tisa, right? When Moshe came before Hashem to speak with him, Yasir esa masveh, he would remove the mask. I'd say so until he left. The Yatzah, then he would come out, v'diber b'nei Yisrael es asher yutzuveh, and he would speak to the Bnei Yisrael that which he had been commanded. And at that moment, they saw those, Rashi explains, they saw those beams of light, the shining light that came from Moshe's face. V'ra'u b'nei Yisrael es pnei Moshe. And the children of Israel saw the face of Moshe, ki koran or pnei Moshe, that Moshe's face was shining. V'hishiv Moshe samasvel panav. Moshe then put the mask back on his face, ad bo'ol ledaber ito, until he returned, until he came once again to speak, to communicate with Hashem, at which point he removes the mask again. So most of the time he's wearing the mask, but the people experience and see the light that shines from his face. Now, the fascinating thing about the Quran or Panav, the light shining from his face, is, if you think about it, the way the majority of the commentators understand the problem with the golden calf was what? We explained this last week. Was what? That they treated Moshe almost godlike, right? And that was the problem, right? And therefore they felt when he was lost, we need a replacement. And that's how you get to the golden calf, right? As a leader. So you could say that this is a potential pitfall for them to once again see him as something non-human almost. So there must be something deeper. There must have been something essential. Why did his face have to shine? Why did his face have to shine? Couldn't just be because of his greatness. There must have been a deeper reason for it and an essential lesson for them. Right? Let's see.
Well, the Torah itself says that to warn us.
Yeah.
That's why the Torah says,
Of course. And no one, exactly. So that people should not fall into that pitfall. 100%. Absolutely. 100%. But we'll see that must be a deeper reason the Midrash gives us as to why and what the purpose was. Okay? Firstly, let's see the Orach Chaim. The Orach Chaim says on this week's parasha, number 3 on the sheet, he says on Vayakhel Moshe, Tzorech ladas, you need to know, he says, Tam shotzrach loma Vayakhel. Why did he need to say that they were gathered? Right? He's got a very simple question. They're always being gathered. Whenever there's a need to tell the people, here's what Hashem has said, then obviously Moshe's gathering them. Guys, it's a big day today. New deal. This is Sukkot today. We're going to tell you about something. It's right. Time to they spent many years in the same place, on the journey. So there wasn't every day necessarily that they were being told new things. But this was obviously they were gathered. Venira, he says, it would seem. Because they saw that his face was shining and therefore they were afraid to come near. As we just said, lozeh, therefore, right? Hutzrach lahakil es kulon. That's why he needed to gather all of them together. Leval yimoneu ketzas mehamor. That's so they should not be afraid, or even like some of them should not be afraid, because some of them, there was a potential for some of them to be afraid. I can't come near. It's too great for me. There's light shining from his face. I can't come near. Right? And v'zeh shediktek loymar es kol adas. And that's why it says that he gathered the whole congregation, right? The whole Eidah. Everyone had to be there. because they had seen this image of his face shining, what did that make them feel like? Says the Orach Chaim, beautiful insight. You know what it made them feel like? It made them feel a bit uncomfortable. It made them feel a bit inadequate. You see what he's managed to achieve? We've now learned our lesson that he's a regular human being, but incredibly spiritual and holy in what he's achieved and everything else. We've learned our lesson, because that's the whole lesson they had to learn from the golden calf, right? That he's a human. But yet, he's able to achieve such spiritual heights. Where am I? Where are we? So to avoid that and overcome that, there's a Vayakhel. Come together. But to get to that point of Vayakhel, there has to be a certain degree of uncomfortability. Because by being uncomfortable, by that certain feeling of inadequacy, that is what enables them potentially to grow and to connect. And when I saw this Orach Chaim, I was reminded of one of the most beautiful short clips, videos made by the late, great Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky. Has anyone seen the video? It's about 90 seconds long, whereby Rabbi Twersky talks about the lesson of the lobster. Has anyone seen that? You have to see it. It's really easy. You Google Rabbi Twersky and the lobster. It is 90 seconds long. This clip has been played more than 84 million times, right? Rabbi Twersky was a great man. He was a psychotherapist, I think. He had the Gateways Rehabilitation Center, help people overcome drug addiction. He was a descendant of a great Hasidic dynasty. He was himself a Chassid, but also highly qualified in secular studies. Amazing individual. He passed away during the pandemic, actually. He actually composed the song, Hoshia Esa Mechal. He sang it as Levaya. People didn't know that he would actually compose that song, the song that we sing, our simplest Torah. Fascinating individual. Learn more about him if you can. Lots and lots. He wrote lots of books. What does he say in this video? He says like this. He says, what is the message of the lobster? He says the lobster is a very soft, squishy animal, right? That's all it is, the lobster itself, right? And it lives within a hard shell. It lives within a hard shell. That's a lobster, right? The stimulus, he says, for the lobster to be able to grow is that it feels uncomfortable. Because when it feels uncomfortable, what does it do? It slithers under another rock, yeah? And then it changes its shell, because it's grown out of its shell, right? That's what happens. The lobster ends up changing its shell. So it looks for a new shell, right? But the only thing that makes the lobster look for a new shell is feeling that it hasn't got any more space in this one. It feels a bit uncomfortable now in the shell. And he says that what he observed from this lesson of the lobster is that sometimes the stimulus for growth is to feel a bit uncomfortable. Sometimes by feeling uncomfortable, people grow. And this is something which is a very fascinating observation. And what he was trying to show through a lot of the work that he does, and helping people who are in a difficult place themselves personally, is sometimes a person could be in a situation, in a position of, it could be adversity, uncomfortability in life, and that can actually help the person to take that next step along the spiritual ladder. And what I think the Orach Chaim is saying is the same idea, in a slightly different way, not about lobster. And that is the idea that they saw and had to see the light shining from Moshe's face, because by seeing that light, they realized we have to take a step ourselves. And that's what led them to consider the possibility of growth. There is an idea to understand what the message of that shining light from Moshe's face was. It is an idea that I shared in the shir that I gave before Yom Kippur, but it is absolutely worth repeating, because I think it has such a beautiful message. I heard it from Rabbi J.J. Schachter, who's Rabbi Dr. J.J. Schachter of Yeshiva University, and he has this beautiful interpretation of a Midrash Yalkut Shimoni. The Yalkut Shimoni says, it's a Midrash on the end of last week's Parsha. It says, next page, number 4, Vayihi beredis Moshe min ahar. When Moshe descended from the mountain, Meheichon notal Moshe karnei hahod. Where did that light come from? Where did those rays of light come to Moshe from? Rabbi Hosseinu Omrim, our teachers, our rabbis told us, they came min hama'ara. They came from the cave. It says, I will place you in the cleft of the rock. Right? When he had this vision and he wanted to understand Hashem's ways, so he was placed in the cave, and that's where he got the light from. That's the first explanation. Rabbi Brechia, a different explanation. You know where he got the light from? Min haluchos. He got it from the tablets themselves. Why? Because it says that the orchon shel luchos, the length of the tablets, was 6 tefachim, was 6 tefachim. V'rochvan gimel, the width was 3. A tefach is about that much, a hand, fist, right? That's how big, they weren't so big. V'haya Moshe machzik b'beis tefachim, v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'beis tefachim. Moshe was holding on, down here, to the first 2 tefachim of the tablets. V'Hashem, and Hashem was holding on to the top 2 tefachim. Can't really get our heads around this. Ubeis tefachim revach be'emtza. And there was 2 tefachim gap in the middle. Misham not till Moshe, Karni Ahod. And from that 2 tefachim gap in the middle, that is where he got the rays of light from. He was holding to 2, Hashem onto 2, and the middle 2, he got the light from. Third explanation. Rabbi Yehuda bar Nachman Omer, you'll see where we're going, you'll see. Rabbi Yehuda bar Nachman said, Moshe kosav es Torah, when Moshe was writing the Torah, Nishtaya b'kulmas kimo, he was writing the Torah, and you know, when you finish writing a scroll parchment on parchment, a scribe, what happens? There's a little bit of ink left over. Don't finish it all. There's a bit of ink left over. What did he do when it'd been a long day, been writing the Torah out? The Hevira al Rosho. So he passed the quill or the ink, it was on it, maybe it was a bit on his hand, he passes it over his brow. The Misham Nasilo Karne Hahod. The bit of leftover ink from writing the Torah, you've been up the mountain, right? Was left over, that bit of leftover ink, he put it on his head, and there his face shone from that. Okay? These are the 3 explanations of the Midrash, right? Number 1, well, yeah. Well, hold on a minute. Number one was the fact that where did he get the light from? From that experience in the cave with Hashem's presence. Number 2, from the middle part of the tablets themselves. That's the second explanation in the Midrash. And the third explanation is that it was the leftover ink from writing the Sefer Torah. So Rav Shechter said a beautiful idea. He said like this: each of these explanations in the Midrash are trying to tell us something, what it means to be able to help ourselves shine in life. The first one is you can shine through being sometimes alone by yourself, a period of self-contemplation. Where does Moshe get the light from according to the first explanation? He gets it from being in the cave. From going deep into himself. He's in the cave alone. He goes deep into himself. He asks himself, what we call kochot hanefesh? What is the strength of my soul? Where am I deeply within myself? What can I do? What can I make a difference? And from there, his face shines. The second explanation is that he gets it from the middle 2 tefachim. In life, what we have to try and do is understand that Hashem is there and we are here. We are on earth, and spirituality and Hashem's presence is just above us. It's only just above us. But our entire mission and role in life is to try and raise our 2 tefachim, our 2 handbreadths, so they're just a little bit closer to the 2 at the top that Hashem is holding on to, right? And that is our whole mission in life. And that's what makes us shine. It is not about us becoming the greatest of the great. It is just raising the bar. That's all. All we're trying to do is, I'm holding on to my faith. I'm holding on to what it means to be a Jew. If I can raise my bar just that bit higher, I can reach up, I can do just a little bit more. That's what makes me shine. That is what makes me have light in life. That's what makes my face shine. And that's the second explanation. And the third explanation, which is perhaps the most beautiful of all, right, is he gets it from the leftover ink. Moshe wipes on his forehead. What is the message? He's done. He's finished. He's written the Sefer Torah. But there's always a little bit more ink. And that is a critical message. There's always more to write. There's always more to do in life. Sometimes we feel, I've done my mission. I've completed my purpose. I've done it. I've done a lot. I've achieved a lot. So the lesson of the light that shines from Moshe Rabbeinu's face is that we've never, ever finished our mission. And it doesn't matter what we think we are, what stage or age we are in life, there's always something else. There's always something new. There's always some more light to bring to this world. And that is the light that shines from Moshe's face with a little bit of ink that's left over from the Sefer Torah he writes. And it's just, I think, such a beautiful, beautiful explanation, and really, I think, brings alive this image of what it means that Moshe Rabbeinu's face shone. So now that we understand a little bit more about the context of the gathering itself, what exactly was it that the Vayakhel achieved? And I think we can summarize this in 2 ways. The gathering achieves the unity of the people in terms of a sacred space, and it achieves unity in terms of sacred time. Okay? Unity in space and unity in time. Again, let's recap the journey we've been on. We started with the Rashi. Rashi says that it is not Moshe forcing people to gather together. It is his word which we can understand by his word, his influence, maybe the message that they've gained from understanding the message of the light that shines, right? That brings them people themselves to come together. That is Vayakhel. That is Vayakhel. We understand that they were at this stage in a position of being uncomfortable. They saw Moshe Rabbeinu's face shining. They knew what they had done wrong, how far they had fallen. Yet, that is the place they needed to be. Vayakhel Moshe, Eskoladas, even those people who were like hanging around at the back, we don't really want to part of this gathering. We're not really, it's not really us, it's for the from people. No, it's for you. You're part of the people. Everyone. Eskoladas, that's the point. That's what Orach Chaim tells us. It's for everyone, without exceptions. And what does it achieve? The Ramban tells us like this. Look at the Ramban. The Ramban says, and we learned before that the Ramban always understands, wherever possible, that things are to be understood in their chronological order in the Torah. He doesn't like the ein mukdam u'muchar, right? The things, sometimes other commentaries are happy with saying that there are logically different order. We learned a beautiful one last week with the Ibn Ezra, if you remember, when the prayer of Moshe, you remember, I'm going too fast, a bit of revision, yeah? Where the prayer of Moshe took place, the first prayer, was it while he was still up the mountain or later on? We learned that last time, right? Says the Ramban. He says, skip the first paragraph. V'hinei Moshe, number source 5, yeah? Achash etzivu la'Aaron v'hanasiim v'chol b'nei Yisrael. After he had commanded Aaron and the Nasiim and all the b'nei Yisrael, everyone, the princes and all the children of Israel, Ha'aroshim, it says, Kol asher diber Hashem eto b'har Sinai, everything that Hashem had spoken to him on Mount Sinai, acharei shavar haluchos, after the breaking of the tablets, v'nosan al ponav hamasveh, as we just learned, he put the mask on his face. He gathered together the whole congregation, anoshim, v'noshim, everyone, men, women, the whole lot. The same as Rashi, that it could be that this was the day after, literally the day after he came down. What did he do? He said to all of them, Inyan HaMishkan. He told them about the topic of building the Mishkan, that he was told to build before the tablets were broken. Again, Ramban goes with the correct order. There's a command given in Parshas Truma several weeks ago to build the tabernacle of Hashem's presence. That was when the command was given. After that, the golden calf, the destruction of the tablets. Since Hashem has agreed, if you like, appeased to come close back to the Jewish people, and has given them, he's given him the second set of tablets. And he's made a new covenant, that Hashem would once again walk amongst them. Those are the key words, those 4 words. They returned to their original state. Ula ahavas klulosom. You know what that means? Ahavat klulotam, ahavat klulotaych. What does that mean? It means the love of your bridal days, like kala, yeah? There's a wedding going on, right? Ahavat klulotaych. The most beautiful phrase, right? Socharti loch, chesed nu'urayich. What does it say? That's it, right? That's what he means. That's where it's from. That's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, right? Right? That Hashem says, I remember the kindness of your youth, the love of your bridal days, when you felt so close to me by doing what? That amazing thing you did, that you left the metropolis of Egypt to follow me in the desert. To follow me in the desert. Eretz lo zarua. You didn't know where you were going. It was a place that there was nothing to eat. There was nothing, and yet you trusted me, Hashem says, and I remember that. And that is in the beginning of Yirmiyahu, after they are told, Mitzofon Tiftach Hara. It's the Haftarah for the first of the 3 weeks of between Shivasa B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, the 3 weeks. It's after they're told that things are very scary now, right? Because there's the Babylonians are on the way. But Hashem says, Zocharti loch, I remember. We use that, of course, we sing it so beautifully as part of Musaf on Rosh Hashanah. It forms part of the Musaf Hamida, right? That's what the Ramban is telling us. They managed to get back to that stage. Rabbi Yodua says, and it's known, and it would be known that the divine presence was amongst them, as they were commanded originally, as it says, they shall make for me a tabernacle, a holy place, and I will dwell amongst them. And therefore, Hashem now commanded them in everything they had been commanded beforehand. This is such a beautiful Ramban, because what the Ramban is doing for us is telling us that, yes, the tablets were broken. They were broken. They could not be fixed. They could not be fixed. They were not fixed. What happened to them? Says the Chazal, Luchos, v'shivrei luchos, menachim ba'aron. Exactly. The tablets, the second set, and the broken pieces of the first set were placed in the ark. Because you live life forwards. You can't live life backwards. So you can't ignore the broken tablets, right? You can't keep them outside the ark. They're going to take that experience with them. It's going to be with them forever. Forever. They're never going to lose the fact that they were shattered and why they were shattered. On the contrary, we know that there were effects of the golden calf in the future as well. But they put them in the ark. And the message that Moshe does, the power of this Vayakhel, and again, coming back to that Rashi, that they come together themselves. He causes them to come together through what he says and does, is he says to them, you can still do this. You can still do this. And although I was told to put you on this amazing pedestal and build this incredible tabernacle before you messed it all up, you can still go back and you can still be Lechtech Acharei Bamidbar. You can still follow Hashem, and it's not to give, and do not give up hope. The point is that not everything that is broken can be healed, but it can be brought together. It can be brought together for what is a unified aim. We can bring it all with us. And that is such a powerful message for life. It is such a powerful message. People and experiences, we go through things that are challenges, and those challenges we don't forget, we don't move on. There's so many experiences like that in life. No one moves on. But what we can do is try and take the broken pieces with us on the journey. And that's what Hashem is trying to tell them to do. Take the broken pieces. Take the broken pieces of those tablets, put them with the whole ones you're going to make now, and build that Mishkan. Build that tabernacle. And I'm going to tell you everything that Hashem told me originally, because I know that you are able to do it. And that is the power of the unity that he creates amongst the people in what we call sacred space. It's a place that's holy. It's like a shul. You know, we have the same idea. A community is full of broken pieces. Because everyone has lots of broken pieces, right? But what you do in a community is everyone often has different broken pieces. So we come together in one space, and the holiness is created by together we're whole. Because together we're whole. There's a beautiful idea, you know, that is the idea of Tefillah B'tzibur. I'm trying to remember who says, I think it's the Kuzari, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, we mentioned him last week. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says, why do you need a minyan? What's the idea of Tefillah B'tzibur? Why do you daven as a community? Why can we daven at home? Or daven in a forest? It's nice and peaceful and quiet and no one's going to disturb me. He says and this was already 12th century, you know, it's very hard for people to have the right intention the whole way through davening. It's not easy, right? To actually focus properly on every word of the prayers, right? It's a difficult thing to do. But in a community, everyone will be focusing at least on some of it. So together you'll get one beautiful whole tefillah. That's what he says. You know, you'll get one prayer that's beautiful and perfect and complete. And that's why, however wonderful your prayer is by yourself, right? And this, by the way, applies to men and women, because everyone connects to tefillah b'tzibur. Doesn't matter whether you're, yes, we have a technical halachic requirement of a minyan of 10 men, but the tzibur, the power of the communal prayer is everyone, right? You connect to that and it becomes one perfect, united tefillah, because we come together in that sacred space.
That's why it's called Kehillah.
Yes, exactly. Vayakhel is a Kehillah. That's exactly what it is, right? Now the second one, which I have to share with you as well, is the concept of sacred time. Because the next verse tells us that there's something which takes precedent over holiness in space. That's really how I think we have to understand it. And that is holiness in time. Look at the next pasuk, Lamed Hey, pasuk Bet. 6 days you shall do work of Ayom HaShvi, on the 7th day, Yeh Lochem Kodesh. It shall be holy. Shabbos, Shabboson Lashem. It is a Sabbath of Shabboson, a special Shabbos for Hashem. Kol ha'oseh b'melacha, you must, anyone who does work shall die. Now this verse, Rashi tells us, look at Rashi, I got it on the sheet here, I think. Yes, top of the next page, it says, 6 yomim, 6 days, Hiktim lohem asharas Shabbos letzivoy meleches hamishkan. He preceded the warning about Shabbat, keeping Shabbat, to the command of the construction of the Mishkan, Loma, to say, she'eno doche es ha-Shabbos, that it doesn't push away Shabbos, that it takes precedence, Now, this is obviously something which is a practical thing they had to know. They had to learn and understand that there are priorities, and yes, this incredible building project is hugely important, But there's something more important, and that is Shabbat, and you need to stop work on Shabbos. And that's amazing and a huge lesson, because for all future generations, are we ever involved in anything greater than this? So if they had to stop, how much more so do we have to stop and protect and observe the sanctity of Shabbat? The Midrash HaGadol, which is the Midrash I've put on the sheet here, he brings a mashal. We can just summarize what it is. He brings a parable to explain what is going on here. He says there was a king once that had a person who was a worker, a chief worker, someone who was in charge of running the affairs for the king. And he said to the worker, he said, I want you to create for me a beautiful palace, and I want you to create this number of stories in the palace, and it should be story with an E. And he wants to create the number of they create a whole beautiful construction, etc., and put these number of different elements in it, and etc., right? And he told him what to do, and he was so happy with it. And it was such a wonderful project, and he's so excited. The king is really excited. He's going to have the best palace in the world, and he's designed it. It's got 100 rooms and 15 bathrooms and whatever. Yeah. Then someone comes in, another important person comes in. She's called a matronis, which is like also a noble woman. Comes inside and says, "Adoni hamelech." It's about halfway down. The simcha sheli eina tomazkir, and my joy you're not interested in. What about me? I'm important too. You're building a big palace for yourself, but what about me? Miyad immediately nifnala, the king turns to this important noble woman, and made her own joy and her own happiness for herself. So too says the Midrash. When Hashem told Moshe to build the Mishkan, Amra Shabbos lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shabbat itself, the Shabbos queen, turns round to Hashem and says, I'm here a long time before this Mishkan. I've been around since the beginning of the world, the 6 days of creation. You sanctified me. You made me holy all of those years ago. Now, you tell them to construct the Mishkan, yet you don't mention me. This is the key point, I think, of the Midrash. Maybe because of the cherishness that the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, have Ba'asiyas HaMishkan, in the creation of the Mishkan, Yechalalu Osi. You know what they're going to do? They're so excited about this tabernacle, this Mishkan, that they'll forget about me and they'll profane the Shabbat. They'll think, we're so excited to do this project, it's got to take precedence. Miyad, immediately, Niflan HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem turns to the Shabbat. V'Omar Moshe says to Moshe, Kasov Parsha l'Shabbos b'Soch Meleches HaMishkan. Put a instruction, a whole parsha about Shabbat within the construction of the Mishkan to say that it doesn't push away Shabbat and Yom Tov. And the key is, therefore, the key idea is that this, you can, if you're involved in a unifying project as a community, there is always a risk that you will lose sight of the ultimate goal. Right? The ultimate goal. And what is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is what goes inside the building. It is not the building itself. A community can be involved in a wonderful, great construction project, right? But it doesn't matter how great and important and holy that construction project is. And you can talk all about how it's going to bring the people together and it's going to bring the amazing for the community. And that's all true. But what for? What for? Only if it has the spiritual core. And that's why they're reminded right at the beginning, you're coming together for the right reason, for a spiritual reason, and you'll demonstrate that by stopping the construction work on Shabbos. You'll stop it by stopping the construction work on Shabbat, right? When I grew up in Kingsbury, that's why I mentioned this story. So we slept in a loft in the upstairs, and we had a view of the skyline of London. It happened to be quite a high point because our road was quite high. We had a view of the whole skyline of London. You could see everything. It was well before the Shard, right? But there was a building that was being constructed, and that building was Canary Wharf, and it was being built by the Reichmann family from Canada. And I remember you telling us, right, that this project was being built and constructed come Friday afternoon in the winter, and the whole project stopped. It was the biggest building in London.
It wasn't helpful because they stopped like 1 minute before Shabbat, and I was telling people at work I've got to leave an hour.
Yeah, okay. That part of the story I didn't know.
I've seen the actual building contract.
That it said that.
The definition of Shabbos sunset.
Exactly right.
And every Yom Tov for the next X years, there's been no building work on any.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. So I remember that left an impression on me. You know, you understand that there are higher ideals than building projects. There are higher things. There are values. So the Baal HaTurim tells us, the bottom of the page, he links this to the shining, the light, right? The shining light. He says, Kasiv Le'el, it says above, Ki Koran or Panav, that his face was shining. Usmichle Parsha Shabbos. And the Parsha of Shabbat is next to it, right? That's what we said. So the Baal HaTurim is going a bit further than we said before, which is that we said that the connection between the end of last week's Parsha, the light of Moshe's face, and the building of the Mishkan. But he says it's also connected to the Parsha of Shabbat. Loma to say, She'eno doma kirun ponim shel Shabbos l'shar hayomim. That the shine that exists on a Jew's face, on a Jewish person's face, on Shabbat, is not like any other day of the week. Okay? And that, says the Baal HaTurim, is the connection between the shine of the face of Moshe and the instruction about Shabbos. Because when we experience and live Shabbos properly, what happens? We shine. And that is a greater shine than any other day of the week. Maybe it's even greater than the shining of the face of Moshe himself. The light that Shabbat brings to us is always greater, and it always has the potential for greatness and bringing spirituality into our lives. The final piece, which I will just summarize very briefly, is another midrash. It's worth bringing this midrash apart from what's contained in the midrash, simply because of the name of the midrash. It's an unusual and slightly more obscure midrash. Midrash Abkir. So do you know what the Midrash Abkir is? Midrash Abkir is a mnemonic. It's a collection of midrashim. There are many different collections of midrashim. It seems to be a midrash that only appears on the first two books of the Torah. I think it's quoted by the Yalkut Shimoni, perhaps, and other midrashim, other more better known midrashim. Abkir is a mnemonic which stands for Amen B'Yamenu Kain Yihi Ratzon, which means that in our days may it be so. Because apparently the original collection of these midrashim, after the end of each midrash of each piece, it would end with that abbreviation. May it be so in our days. Amen B'Yamenu Kain Yihi Ratzon, which is Abkir. Anyway, so there you are. He says like this: the midrash tells us that there is no parsha from the beginning of the Torah until this point that begins the word Vayakhel. This is the only one. It's the whole way through. This is the first parsha which begins this word Vayakhel, and he gathered. As Hashem said like this, third line down, Omra Kodesh Baruch Hu, Asei Lecha Kehilos Gedolos. He says, Hashem says, you know what I want you to do? You know what I want you to do with your great future as a people? I want you to build beautiful, great communities, big shuls, big communities. Udrosh Lifneim Barabim Hilchot Shabbat. And what are you going to do in those communities? You're going to speak publicly and you're going to talk about the laws of Shabbos and what it means, how precious Shabbat is. Kedei sheyilmadu mimcha doros haboim, so that the generations to come will learn from you. Lahakil kilos b'chol Shabbos v'Shabbos, to bring people together on every Shabbat. V'lichnos, and to enter b'batei midrashos, into the study houses, into the shuls. Lilmod ulahoros liYisrael, to teach the Jewish people Divrei Torah isavaheta, what you can do, what you can't do. Kedei sheyishmi hagadol miskales b'nbonai, so my great name should be praised amongst my children. And therefore, he says, that is where you have the institution, the Midrash tells us, of every festival we get together and we learn about Pesach. On Pesach, it goes on to explain, and we learn and we gather people together. And Hashem says, Moshe tells the Jewish people, if you live your lives in this way, if you behave in this way, Hashem will consider it as if you have crowned him as king in his world. V'atem eidai, it brings a verse, V'atem eidai nu'um Hashem v'anikel. You are my witnesses. You are my witnesses, Hashem says. And the message, I think, it's such a beautiful way, I think, to finish the shir, is that what we attempt to do in our communities today on a tiny scale, as a community, is exactly the same as the aim of Moshe Rabbeinu then. The aim of Vayakhel is to understand that we can give you the words. Moshe says to the Jewish people, I will give you the words. Remember, it's the words that inspire them. It's maybe the message of his face shining, but ultimately it's up to you. Ultimately it's up to you. You will be caused to gather. But once you gather, understand that it is down to you. Understand that it's inspiration you put into it yourselves as a people. Understand that sometimes, yes, that involves a certain degree of uncomfortability, as they felt from seeing the light on Moshe's face. What have we become? Where have we got to? Remember the story of Rabbi Twersky and the lobster, but it helped them grow. And then ultimately they understand that the ultimate aim is to build a sense of a sacred space. That's the Mishkan, a place that's holy in time. We come together as a community. By joining together, we are all so much greater and bigger than we are as individuals. And never forgetting that the point and the purpose of the whole thing is to make sure that we sanctify time. Make sure our time, which is the most precious thing we own, has holy moments. And the Shabbat is a great example of that. Because if we go through life without a Shabbat, without a concept of what it means to have that time, then we can end up one day running into the next. Never lose sight. The spirituality must be at the core of everything we do. And with that, we can hope to achieve things in life. Shabbat Shalom. Be able to send it to me. So much, amazing. Yes, Kingsbury, Allard Way, Salmon Street. You know the top of